We can only advance through open-mindedness, thinking outside the box, using our critical thinking. But if we can't even look at Shakespeare critically, which after all happened some 400 years ago, an ocean away from here, the great minds like Mark Twain and Sigmund Freud have questioned, if we can't even look at Shakespeare critically, my God, what are we doing at universities? What's happening with other subjects? How often is independent thought shot down and conformist thinking rewarded? What kind of an educational system promotes orthodoxy over curiosity, draws conclusions from inconclusive evidence, and defends these weak conclusions at all costs, condemning as crackpots all those who dare to question? In my opinion, we have no idea who wrote the works of Shakespeare. It's a person, which person? A group, what group? And the main reason we don't is because most professors, instead of encouraging open research, are doing something akin to the following. Trust us! We're the experts, we're the authorities, we know Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. It's beyond all doubt, it's a certain fact. It cannot be questioned. Only a crackpot would suggest otherwise. And you mustn't read any book unless we tell you to read it, which we won't, unless it says what we want it to say. And whoever is the joker that's been placing books on my desk, stop it. I only read books which confirm my opinions. And if you wish to succeed in academia, you'll do the same. You'll listen to what we say, you'll repeat back to us what we said, and you will never, ever think for yourself. But what would happen if a professor, instead of telling his students what to think, was to allow his students to learn how to think? I might be able to answer that question. Professor Don Rubin of York University has been teaching a course called Shakespeare, the Authorship Question. York University in Toronto is one of the few universities anywhere in the world that even touches on the subject, let alone teaches a whole course in it. How does the course work? It's open to fourth-year students. It fills up quickly with a waiting list. On the first day of class, the students are divided into small groups, and each of the groups is assigned one of the many candidates who may have written the works of Shakespeare, including the traditional William Shakespeare Stratford. Each of the groups will have to make a presentation for the class explaining how their assigned candidate wrote the works of Shakespeare. It's an exercise in research and critical thinking. And on the last day of class, there's an open discussion, then a secret vote to see who these students think wrote Shakespeare. I have visited the class. I've performed as Shakespeare Dead for them. I can tell you these students were engaged. They loved studying the subject. It opened up the period to them. How did the vote turn out for the class that I visited? When these students voted as to who, at the end of the course, wrote Shakespeare in their opinion, William Shakespeare, the man we are taught is certain and beyond doubt wrote the works of Shakespeare, he came in seventh. Seventh! After the group theory, the Earl of Oxford, Francis Bacon, Christopher Marlowe, and some others. William Shakespeare did come ahead of someone called Roger Manners, the Earl of Rutland. Well, not that that proves anything. It's still possible the Earl of Rutland wrote Shakespeare. This whole class was just an exercise in research and critical thinking. Yet this course came under tremendous attack. It was condemned by all the professors. They were outraged that a great university like York University would teach the Shakespeare authorship question. The newspapers were furious. The Globe and Mail wrote a whole article saying that Professor Don Rubin must retire. He's obviously lost his marbles. See, students cannot be allowed to study the Shakespeare authorship question, because when they do, the majority will come to the same crackpot position that Mark Twain did, that the traditional story of William Shakespeare as the author of Shakespeare's works never happened. We all suffer from the prejudice that academics, educators, professors are the experts. They say it's certain and beyond doubt that Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. Well, they must know. They are, after all, the authorities. But Albert Einstein said, blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth. And Einstein also said, the only thing that gets in the way of my learning is my education. Which probably explains why Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg, the founders of Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook, all quit college early. Very early. Steve Jobs quit after a single term. What could these innovative geniuses have accomplished had they stayed in university and graduated? Would they have accomplished more or less? Well, considering Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook are three of the most successful corporations on earth, it's kind of hard to argue they could have accomplished more. So less. What is it about universities that would make these geniuses accomplish less? The answer, I believe, comes from Fred Smith, the founder of Federal Express, who actually did graduate from college. But the paper he wrote for economics class, which would be the basis for his package delivery empire, received from his economics professor a C grade. Fred Smith got a C for inventing Federal Express. Apparently, the professor wrote on his paper, "Interesting idea, Fred," but not really proven. Grade C. Fred Smith got a C. I'm not suggesting that colleges and universities don't have their place. Great things are accomplished there. But what we forget, or perhaps some of us never knew, is, sometimes great things are stopped in their tracks too. There are brilliant ideas that have been quashed by universities for years, if not decades, until they finally break through somewhere else, and then lo and behold, these same universities adopt these new ideas, and they in turn become orthodox thought, which must never be questioned. As George Bernard Shaw so aptly said, all great truths begin as blasphemies.